Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Jobadiah Christensen, and today I wanted to talk about ancient Mayan mud, which is what I thought the article was going to be on. I spotted this article, it popped up in my feed, and I went and tried to search for some other articles. Today I just want to talk about some history and archaeology of the Mayans. If you haven't heard my channel before, you may ask what's my credibility to be able to do this. And I'll tell you, I have a master's and a bachelor's degree in history. I have a minor in archaeology, and I participated in boots on the ground field work, archaeological field work in Jordan. So I know ancient Near East pretty well, especially Jordan and the Levant area. I have been to the Yucatan Peninsula and seen a Mayan site. I just went there for my honeymoon last year. Did not get to spend as much time there as I would have liked. Um, I don't know as much about the I'll just say North American civilizations, or the American civilizations would be more apropos. Mesoamerican civilizations is actually the word I should use. I don't know as much about them, but I still know a fair amount. I have read some things. And so when I first saw this article, I thought this might be talking about um, stuff that they put on their houses. But now that I've actually scanned a little bit, and looking for other articles to explain this, I uh, I have a better idea of what they're going to be talking about in this article. So first, I want to break this down. I found this article and it was on Pocketworthy, which I had actually not heard of before. The first thing I do when I see something, before I even read the article, you want to check your sources. You want to make sure that what you're reading is done by someone who's credible, right? That's why at the beginning of this video, I'm telling you who I am, so you can take me as credible or not. That's up to you. If you don't believe in in my education, as being credible for me to have knowledge to talk about this, that's your prerogative. You are allowed to do that, and you're allowed to close this video if you don't think I have the knowledge to be able to talk about this. So I just want to let you know where I come from. Don't take any source on face value. You need to, or any, I want to wind back. Don't just open an article and assume it's true because it's on the internet. You got to look at the sources, right? I think this is a journalist, and everything I found a couple different articles. I think they're all by journalists. Actually, this is by the same person, so I'm going to close this one. I couldn't find this news on an actual archaeological site, which is to me a little questionable. So this is probably going to be pretty fan servicey, and not as academic as I would like. That's okay. I did find it on a couple different sites. I found the same thing posted on the Washington Post and another one posted by Fox News on New York Post, right? It was written by Fox News, but then it was posted on New York Post. So make what you will. Um, make what you will. So I'm just gonna go into this. So if you don't know much about the Mayans, I forget when they started, but they generally rose to prominence around 400 BC, and they're what we as archaeologists and historians have called the collapse of Mayan civilization occurred somewhere between 800 and 900 AD. So they lasted a pretty long time. Now, when I say collapse, what does that mean, right? Did they just disappear? No. It's generally thought, known and thought that what happens around 900 AD, why we call this a collapse, is that what we see before that time period, like the golden age, is really from I think 200 to 600 AD. These are just general broad terms. You can look on Wikipedia. This is just what I'm pulling out of my head from stuff I've read before. I've read a book and I've studied this a little bit. So if you want to know more, go research it more by all means. This is just to give you broad scope. So collapse basically means they're not in a golden period, particularly in the case of the Mayans. During their golden period, we call it their golden period because they're building big structures. they're creating really nice artwork. They're carving really intricate carvings. Their pottery is more intricate. And we can tell from all that there's a higher degree of advanced organization going on to make all those things possible, right? When you're just eking out a subsistence life, hunter gathering, you don't have the means, you don't have the time, you don't have the resources to make the intricate things that the Mayans were making at this time. Then around the 900 AD, you don't see these things as much anymore, right? They don't build the new big temples anymore. You don't see as intricate of pottery. You don't find them carving like these things as you see in this photo. Are they still living? Absolutely. But we see them not really living. They're not creating new things. And so we don't have a record of what they're doing. And so we call it a collapse. Okay? Um, there's a lot of theories, and there's people who have written whole books, and there's arguments that go on about was it really a collapse and what caused the collapse. So this article is actually going to give us some insight into what caused what we call the collapse. I'm not going to get into more semantics than that. You could go research that if you want to. It's a pretty popular topic for people who study Mayan and particularly Mesoamerican history. But the Mayans were still around when the Spanish came in the 1500s, right? Christopher Columbus comes 1492, and then a wave of Spanish come in the 1500s in the 16th century. Mayans are still there, they're just not living, or maybe they're living in the big cities, but the cities aren't really populated, right? There might be people eking out existence, but they're just using the shells of things, and they're not like keeping up the city as it would have been kept up 800 years prior. So that's what we call collapse. Most of them are living in villages, in like thatch huts outside in the jungle. They're not really living the way that the Mayans lived during the Golden Age with their big limestone temples and whatnot. So I can tell you right now what this is going to get into. What they found is some sort of a creek, or not creek. What some archaeologists do is they go to either modern lakes or ancient lakes. Then they drill down, they take mud samples in these giant tubes. It's kind of almost like they stick this thing in the ground. It's not an auger. It's kind of like when you're drilling for oil, but you don't go nearly so deep. And they just pull out this long cylindrical tube of earth, of dirt. But then in the dirt, you can see the layers, and then you can pick apart and you can say, okay, we know approximately at this layer that's going to be 900 AD, what happened then? And then you specifically look at that layer. And then you pull these tubes out all over the lake, bottom of the lake. And that's how they make their analysis. So this is a particular subfield within the overarching field of archaeology. These people are also most likely probably geologists or something along have at least geological training, right? So I'm not going to read the article verbatim. It's here if you want to go read it. I'm just going to scan through it, okay? So this is 3,000 year dominance over Mesoamerica. I wouldn't call it 3,000 years. In my mind, dominance means their golden period. So they probably only had about 1,000 years of dominance. Were they living for 3,000? Sure, you could probably find traces of Mayan civilization for 3,000 years. I don't know. I'm not going to dispute that right now. Okay, this is just this. Yep. The Mayan Empire collapsed, falling apart in just 150 years. Reason remains a mystery. So they're not going to give us any of the current models. There are several models of why this happens. The prevalent model that I've seen of why this happened was, I think there was a combination of drought, and whenever you have a drought, you're going to have less food. So now if you built your whole civilization on these urban centers, which are the Mayan cities we find today in the middle of the Yucatan, they're the urban centers, then you have a number of farmers living out in the jungle providing crops to those urban centers. If you have a drought, certainly those crops aren't coming in. What happens? You have people in the urban centers rioting, and they're either just going to leave and go back to the jungle and, not basically let themselves be ruled by the upper class, or they're going to overthrow the upper class. in some places it's violent. Also, at the same time, I think Mayan civilization, you shouldn't think of it as a unified Mayan empire. You should think of it as kind of like the United States of America, where there's all these different Mayan states. So everyone in the US calls themselves Americans. But what if you didn't have an overarching constitution that linked all the states together? What if Georgia decided they wanted to attack South Carolina and take some of their people and resources and incorporate them into Georgia? That's what the Mayans, we think some of the Mayans states were doing at the time. And states, we basically mean city states, right? So these are rulers, probably kings maybe, that had some overarching power that ruled from a particular city, had control over a certain area where they got their resources. There is no unified king over all of Mayan civilization. That's not who they were. Okay? So you have warfare, internal fighting. Maybe you also have a drought coming in, if I remember right. And one of those things alone isn't enough to cause a collapse. But if you stack two or three or four things on top of each other, you might get a collapse, which I don't want to get too political, but that's something I've been thinking about in the US right now as I make this. We've got disease, we've got the pandemic, then we've got riots going on, and suddenly, if you just stack like one or two more things on top, everything falls apart and collapses. That's typically what we think when we study the past. That's how we think these civilizations collapsed. And so, can the US recover from just a pandemic? Absolutely. Can the US recover from riots, rebuild itself into a new society? Probably. But if we stack those two together, and then maybe something else happens, like financial disaster, maybe it all just comes undone, which is probably what happened to the Roman Empire. So anyway, I'm not going to get into that now. Maybe I'll get into that later in a different video. This is talking about, okay, here, now they're listing the reasons, right? Deforestation, overpopulation, and extreme drought have all been proposed as the reason for the empire's collapse. There you go. My memory served me mostly right, okay? They don't talk about warfare, but that's fine. The most probable of those, argues University of Cambridge, is drought. Yep, that's what I thought I remembered. Most probable, right? It's hard to prove this, but most probable. The evidence they gathered in muddy sediments underlying Lake Chichikanab, which I don't know if I said that right, once part of the empire, underscore the devastating power. Okay, so sediment cores, yeah, so that's what they did. They brought up sediment cores from the depths of the lake. They look at precipitated gypsum. Okay, so they're looking at isotopes of water molecules, and then so the isotope of the water molecule lets you know like how many years have passed. Oh, actually, okay. So looking at the isotopes of the hydrogen, it shows. I don't really understand the science of this because I haven't studied this before, but so that somehow shows that it's arid in certain periods. So then you can look at the core of the sediment core and you can tell when it's more arid and not. That's interesting. During periods of drought, larger amounts of water evaporate, and so a higher proportion of lighter isotopes in gypsum indicates a period of drought. Learn something new. Okay, so this is a whole subfield. People, they just do this. They take sediment cores and they look at this, right? They do this all over the world. This is what they do. The team determined that between the years 800 and 1000, so that's 200-year span, annual rainfall in the Maya lowlands, which if I remember the lowlands, that's the Yucatan Peninsula. The highlands are further to the west, I believe, in what is modern-day Belize and Guatemala. Decreased by nearly 50% and up to 70% during peak drought conditions. This means the rainfall essentially stopped about the same time the Empire city-states were abandoned. Yeah. And that's talking about modern droughts. I'm going to skip that. This is a really short article. Okay, so basically all this is saying is these scientists from University of Cambridge which I trust them. There's some universities you actually can't trust, but I trust Cambridge and University of Florida work together. They pulled sediment cores out. They looked at the hydrogen isotopes, and that indicated that with it that they told them that it was more arid, which meant that there was less rainfall. Okay, that's all this is saying. They didn't look at anything else. Let's take a look at the Washington Post article. I want to see if they give any more information. They must have interviewed the same. They either interviewed the same person or they pulled from the scientist, probably the scientist article. So the scientist probably wrote and published an article, and then these journalists, reporters, took that academic article and then pulled from it to write these articles. And that's why I couldn't find anything, because it's probably published and I need to actually go find the academic article, which is just going to have a lot more detail on how they do the sediment cores and analyzing the sediment cores. Okay. The drought was previously known, yeah, because they've known that since like the 80s, right? But this study is the first to quantify the rainfall, relative humidity, and evaporation at the time. Yeah, this is a really scientific. They can actually like detail exactly how bad the drought was and quantify it, right? There's little clues archaeologists have that they can tell that there was a drought, but they can't necessarily say how bad it was or quantify it and compare it to, a drought that we experience today. And it's the first to combine multiple elemental analyses and modeling to determine the climate record during the Mayan civilization demise. Now, what I would like them to do, I don't know how deep they took the core. I would try to get a sample. I would try to do the same process and take a sediment core that goes all the way back to like 200 BC and then analyze it to see if there are other droughts earlier on that they did recover from. Because it's never, like I said earlier, it's never just one thing, right? Civilizations can survive drought if it's just drought. There are other factors that come into play. This article, so the reason why these journalists are writing about this is because they're taking this as what happened to the Mayans. They're taking this to say, to talk about the modern issue of climate change, because we're going to have a lot more droughts in the years to come. So this is kind of like they look at something in the past and they use it to justify something in the present, is basically what these journalists are doing. Yeah, it's a geological time capsule. Okay, let's find out where this lake is, because I don't know where this lake is, and that we should do. So, this lake, I want to know a map. Is it in Mexico? Oh, yeah, it's on the Yucatan. Okay. Yep. Okay, so they went to this lake and they took cores from here. Now all that proves is that the area here, this is the lowlands. Let me click on that. Daily Mail. No, I don't care about this. Get out of here. I just want to see the image. View image. There we go. So this is the lowlands. This is the Yucatan Peninsula. And the highlands are over here, right? You can kind of see the mountain ridges. So all this proves is that in this area, there was drought. This does not prove that there was drought in the highlands. There were Mayans living all the way through here as well in the highlands. So when we talk about collapse, we're primarily talking about collapse of here. But of course, everything is interconnected. Even if the states are not necessarily unified, they're trading with each other, right? They're probably trading fish into the highlands, or they're trading back and forth. And so if one collapses, the other one can't continue living the way it has been living. All right. If the drought was intense and long-lasting gypsum crystals formed and incorporated existing lake water. Oh, okay. Interesting. The fossil water. So they're analyzing the properties of the lake water. Interesting. That's really cool. I didn't know you could do that. So the chemical composition of the fossil water they're basically evaluating like the lake water got trapped in the gypsum so they can tell what the consistency, what the water was like at that time, which then tells you, yeah, what the general humidity and rainfall would have been like. Okay. I don't know enough about the chemical properties of water to explain it further than this. They also think that mine's deforestation. Yeah, because as your civilization grows and grows and grows, they're just getting more and more and more people. So what do you need? You got to chop down more and more of the rainforest to have subsistence farming. Subsistence farming. And so they also have pointed to that as like over farming and whatnot. Um, as one of the things. And then if you rely so much on subsistence farming and a drought comes, now you don't have anything. You don't have the food you need. So, right, may have impacted Mayan agriculture at a critical time in their history. Then it's talking about modern things. Let's just look at the Fox News article. Blah, blah, blah. Yes, they've known about this drought since the 1990s. I think they've actually known about it earlier than that. But I mean, you just think back for us Americans, the Dust Bowl happened in the 1930s, and we're talking about like 10 years of drought. Just was terrible for the US. And then you take, what if there was 50 years of drought or more, you know? Um, yeah. So this is just talking about drought disrupting. This doesn't give any more information. Okay. I wish I could find the original article. So that has nothing to do with this. All right. So there you have it. They just found more evidence that points to drought as being one of the factors. Um, so that's all I have for you today. I'm thinking about calling this History Time with Jobadiah. Thank you for listening, for watching this. Go check out these articles if you want. I'll post each of them in the description below, even though they all pretty much say the same thing. I'll see if I can find the actual academic article, but it'll probably be behind a paywall. Most academic work is you have to have a subscription to a specific study. Here's their study. No. Yes. Here it is. PDF. Okay, so if you want to really get into the nitty-gritty of it, I'll post this link to this article as well. So, thank you so much for joining me as we looked at more evidence and information about the Mayan demise. And let me know if there's anything you want me to talk about. If you can come across anything pops up on your newsfeed, there's so much stuff being found and discovered and researched all around the world. I can't keep up with all of it. So I only talk about the things that I see that actually come across my desk and that I have time to make a video on. So have a great rest of your day and keep learning, keep studying, and keep it real.